Welcome everybody. I'm Jonathan Fernandez from Esfiel, Spain, and today I have the pleasure of being here with Dr. Michael Edelstein. He's a doctor in psychology. He specializes in anxiety, depression, and relationship issues. He's also the author of, among other books, the bestseller 3 Minute Therapy, for which he was awarded Author of the Year. He's with us today to talk about Ayn Rand's concept of self-esteem and how to be emotionally free in an unfree world. So, Dr. Edelstein, if you like, you can explain to us what is Ayn Rand concept and what's wrong with it.
Okay, very good. I'd love to do that, Jonathan. And also, by way of introduction, I'd like to say that I'm a clinical psychologist right now. I have a remote practice, so I see people internationally. And 3 minutes. So, the basic concept, since we'll be discussing self esteem, let's talk about emotions and where they come from. Feeling high or low self esteem is a feeling, it's an emotion. So the issue is, where do emotions come from? And most people would say our emotions come from situations. So if I win the lottery, as an extreme example, and I'm happy, the intuitive view is I'm happy because I won the lottery. But that's not how we work psychologically. The way we work psychologically is that it's never situations themselves that forces us to feel or emote in any way, but rather it's our thinking about the situations. So if I win the lottery and I'm happy, it's because of what I'm telling myself, what I'm thinking. Isn't it wonderful I won the lottery? This is great. I can now buy a car, buy a house, travel around the world. I'll have a happy life. What could be better? So it's that thinking that causes our emotions, not situations. Now, to put it in a specific model, there's an ABC model. A stands for activating event or antecedent event. So in this case, A would be I won the lottery. B would be what I'm telling myself. It's wonderful. Oh, B stands for belief. It's wonderful I won the lottery. This is great. And that's what causes our emotions. At C, emotional consequences. So keep this model in your mind. B causes C. Your thinking causes your emotions, not A, the situation. And that's a very powerful idea, because if it's your thinking that causes your emotions and your feelings, if you don't like your emotions, you can change your thinking. So if you're feeling low self-esteem or high self-esteem, look at your thinking, see what you're telling yourself, and see if that's realistic. And my contention is it's not. It's never makes any sense to feel good about yourself, give yourself high self-esteem, or feel bad about yourself, give yourself low self-esteem. If you wanted to evaluate yourself or put yourself in a nutshell, all we could say is when you act well or you act poorly, or people like you or people don't like you, this is your behavior, this is situations. You're always just an imperfect human who acts imperfectly at the very worst, never a bad or good person. And once you get to that, and that takes a radical change in thinking and a new philosophy about yourself, and we might apply it to others and your life. Once you get to that, then you get to not high or low self-esteem, but unconditional self-acceptance. USA, unconditional self-acceptance, accepting yourself, your essence, your personhood, as an imperfect human who acts imperfectly. So there's never any reason to put yourself up, give yourself high self-esteem, or put yourself down, give yourself low self-esteem. And there are many problems with doing either. So that's the basic fundamentals. Do you have any questions about that, Jonathan?
Yeah, in an interview with, I think that it was Tom Woods, You pointed out that the psychologist's recommendation to have high self-esteem is a trap. I don't know if you can please develop this idea.
Yeah. So keep in mind the structure. If you develop high self-esteem, it's because of your thinking, what you're telling yourself. And normally you're telling yourself something like, I did well, or I'm doing well, or important people in my life like me, therefore I'm a good person. And then when you conclude I'm a good person, then you have high self-esteem. Rather than concluding I'm an imperfect human, and no matter what happens, I'm still the same imperfect human. So some of the traps with high self-esteem is if you have high self-esteem, you think well of yourself, your total self, then it's going to be hard to think critically about your behaviors, because if your behavior defines you, then you won't want to admit you have bad behaviors, because that'll make you a bad person or give you low self-esteem. Also, it tends to lead to invidious comparisons with others. So if I have $1 million and Jonathan, you have $100, then with self-esteem, I could think, well, I'm a good person. I'm better than Jonathan because he only has $100 and I have $1 million. And that's not going to do well in a mutually conducive relationship. So that's another problem with it. Also, when you give yourself a rating, like high self-esteem, then it's hard to change, because if this is you, this is your essence, then how could a good person do poorly? Obviously, he can't. And the bigger problem is on the other side of the coin. If you do poorly, which we all do much of the time, then you're a bad person. How can a bad person, a loser, a failure, act well? Obviously, he can't. And just like if I'm a human, I can't be a dog. No matter how much I act like a dog, I'm never a dog. My essence is humanness. So I could crawl on all fours. Jonathan, you could put a leash around me and take me for a walk, or give me a bowl of water and I could lap up the bowl of water. I'm acting like a dog, but that's not my essence. I'm always a human. Bottom line, acting like a dog. So don't overgeneralize from rating your behavior to rating your total self. That's an overgeneralization and it doesn't follow. So those are some of the problems with it. Another problem is that it leads to, if you have high self-esteem, it will tend to lead to anxiety, because now your ego is on the line. And suppose I've given some good interviews and I feel good about myself, I give myself high self-esteem, I'm likely to feel anxious about the next interview because my worth is on the line. My ego is on the line. And that's not going to help in the interview. It'll distract me from thinking clearly. So those are some of the problems with it. And did you have any questions about that before I go on?
Yeah, unconditional acceptance cannot be used like an excuse for bad people. Like they can be bad people that say, "Well, I need to accept myself no matter what."
Yeah, well, they can't be bad people, as I just described. But yes, you have a good question there, Jonathan. It could be used as an excuse. No matter what I do, I'm a mass murderer. I'm still just an imperfect human, so it doesn't matter. But the conclusion of I'm an imperfect human is not, it doesn't matter. It does matter because we have goals in life. We have things we like to accomplish. And if I'm a mass murderer, I wind up in jail or worse, and I can't pursue my happiness. I can't pursue my goals. I can't get a PhD in psychology and those kinds of things. So the idea of unconditional acceptance doesn't throw out goals. In fact, it reinforces goals, because if you're not worried about your rating or your ego, then you can focus more clearly on achieving your goals, on conducting a good interview, or eating healthfully and exercising, or having a good relationship with my partner, those kinds of things. Those are goals. All we have always, and also another problem with self-esteem is it's not empirical. If we walk down the street and we see other people, we don't see good people or bad people. No one's walking around with a halo or horns with a pitchfork. They're a god or a devil. But what we see is humans doing things. And some of the things they do are good and some of the things they do are bad, but we don't see good or bad humans. So that's another problem with it. And also, there are illogicalities in history. For example, Beethoven, the great composer, was depressed much of his life. He had suicidal ideation after he wrote the Third Symphony. He had mood swings. He had difficulty getting along with people. So according to this paradigm, because he did so poorly at these things, he would be a bad person. But there's a problem there. He did some very good things. He wrote great music. So is he a good person or a bad person? There's a contradiction there. So that was true with Darwin also, who was a brilliant naturalist, but he had bouts of depression, panic attacks, and there were periods in his life where he didn't do any research or writing because of these things. So was he a good or bad person? Well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute to do that. Also, there are some studies of self-esteem, and it turns out that criminals often have high self-esteem, and one of their reasons they're criminals is because they think they're better than you are, and they deserve your well-earned money more than you do, so they have a right to take it. And if you have high self-esteem, you're more likely to have an entitlement mentality. I'm entitled to these things because I'm a good person. That's another problem that we see in criminality and research. There have been studies of smoking, and people who have high self-esteem at times, some of the studies indicate they have difficulty giving up smoking because, as I said earlier, it's hard for them to criticize their behavior. It's bad I'm smoking because that would mean, given their overgeneralizing, rating their total self based on their behavior, that would mean that they're a bad person. And who wants to face the fact that you're a bad person? So that's a problem there. Also, having high self-esteem leads to trying to prove yourself in life, prove you're this good person, prove you're still worthy of high self-esteem, rather than enjoying yourself and being productive. So it distracts you from some of these major goals in life. Now, again, this doesn't mean you throw out all rating or all judging. Some psychologists will say, don't judge yourself and don't judge. Don't make judgments. But we want you to judge your behavior, because if you judge it as good, then try to maintain it. If you judge your behavior as poor, then you try to improve it. So rate your behaviors, but don't rate your total self. That is the basic message. And if you don't have high or low self-esteem, how could you think about yourself? Unconditional self-acceptance, USA, unconditionally accepting yourself as the imperfect person you are, the mistake-making human you are, but never a good person in that light.
Okay, but if we continuously qualify our acts, this could be a solution to the problem posed, but that will not necessarily lead to self-esteem. Can both things be easily separated?
So if I understand your question, Jonathan, correct me if I don't. Can you easily separate the
The
rating of yourself from the
Yeah,
rating of your behavior. Is that the
yeah.
question?
Rate. Can you easily separate the rate that you make of yourself in a situation from the self-esteem in general?
Uh, no, you wouldn't want to separate that because the rating you make of yourself is self-esteem. When you rate yourself rather than your behavior, then you give yourself either high or low self-esteem. So the real issue is distinguishing between the rating of yourself and the rating of your behavior. How do you not rate yourself? If I do a good interview, how do I not think I'm a good person, or I'm a success as a person? And if I do a poor interview, how do I not think I'm a failure, I'm a loser? So, and the answer is by using the empirical method and asking yourself, if I did a good interview, what's the evidence? What's the data? What's the logic that supports the idea that I'm a good person because I did well? And I haven't heard of any empirics or data that proves when you do well, that changes your essence, your personhood, your being. It just changes how well you did, and maybe it changes how close you are to accomplishing your goal. So rate your behavior, don't rate yourself, and go for unconditional self-acceptance. But at the same time, as you're pointing out, Jonathan, in your question, keep your goals in mind. Keep what you'd like to achieve in mind. That's your behavior, not the total self. So don't say it doesn't matter at all, because I'm not going to be a bad person. But say, if I want to enjoy life and be productive, I had better rate my behavior and work toward what I would like.
It seems a little hard to separate those things, but
It's hard to separate rating yourself from rating your behavior.
yeah, because,
Yeah, it is. Oh, that's a good point. It is hard. One of the reasons why it's hard is because we all have a biological predisposition with a tendency to rate our total selves based on our behavior. So we're working against a biological predisposition. So when something is hard that you'd like to accomplish, the solution is work hard at it. So I teach my clients what I call 3-minute exercises, where they're cognitive exercises, usually in writing, where they question, challenge, and contradict their ideas that the rating of their behavior equals the rating of themselves. And they do that on a regular basis. So it's like learning a language. Thinking in terms of unconditional self-acceptance rather than thinking in terms of self-esteem is like thinking in Spanish. Do you speak Spanish? Is that your language?
yeah,
Yeah. So if I wanted to learn Spanish and you were my Spanish tutor, I wouldn't just come to a lesson every week, but you would tell me, you better practice every day. Practice the vocabulary, practice the grammar, practice the syntax every day on a regular basis. And that's the route to learning Spanish. And your English is very good. I'm sure you practiced. Did you
yeah.
grow up in a bilingual home?
And well, I live in the United States for 5 years, so
Oh, okay. So that illustrates my point. You got a lot of practice living in the
yeah,
United States. You got a lot of practice in a new language. You got to practice 24 hours a day practically. And that's why your English is good. So if you want to learn unconditional self-acceptance and separate the rating of yourself from the rating of your behavior, which you correctly say, Jonathan, is difficult to do. Practice, practice, practice. Question, challenge, and contradict your self ratings again and again and again. The more you do, the more you begin to develop a new perspective of unconditional self acceptance. By the way, this could apply to dealing with others also. So if you get angry, resentful, hostile toward others, you're rating them. You're saying, because they treat me poorly or I don't like their behavior, they're bad people and they deserve to roast in hell, and I'm going to roast them. So I get angry and resentful and tell them off and yell and things like that. So again, the solution is no rating of humans, just rating of human actions.
Okay. Okay. Well, there are some people who say that nothing is good or bad. That is thinking what makes
That's
it.
a quote from Shakespeare, from Hamlet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you share this view, or do you believe that there may be something objectively bad or good actions?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's a little off the self-esteem thing, but it's interesting. And the answer is, yeah, I agree with Hamlet and Shakespeare. I think it was Polonius who said that nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And we judge things as good or bad in terms of goals, and goals are subjective. Um, so if my goal is to write a great book, and your goal is to write great music, we can't say I'm right and you're wrong, but we can say if my goal is to write a good book, I'm doing well if I work on it every day. So we rate my behaviors in terms of my goals. Or if you work on your song every day, we could say you're doing well, but we can't say your goal of writing a song, my goal of writing a book is one is better than the other. Those are subjectives. Those are subjective. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but we can say that some people did something objectively wrong.
I think that's an interesting question. I think humans are subjective, and it's only wrong, you could say objectively wrong, if it's going to achieve their subjective goal. So you can say coming up with a goal is subjective, no right or wrong. But then you could say the means toward achieving that goal is right or wrong in terms of how efficient it is in achieving that goal. So, for example, if your goal is peace, as yours and mine is, world peace, then we can't prove that world peace is good or bad. We could prove it has good or bad aspects based on our goal, and we could do good or bad things to achieve that. But I don't see an objective measure to saying working toward peace or working toward bad is good or bad. I mean, working toward war or working toward peace is good or bad.
Okay. Uh, in an interview, you said that self-esteem leads to nationalism and imperialism,
Yeah,
since
yeah.
there is a competition for who does it better. Could this be a good thing about self-esteem if it's not an aggressive or military nature? If there is a healthy competition?
Oh, yes, yes, that's a good point. And healthy competition means how could I do better to beat the other team in soccer or baseball or things like that, or thrive more than the other nation. So that's fine, and that's putting your national um, heritage or national identity first. But nationalism is an ism, and it means more than that. Normally, it means there is objective good or bad, and you should act in terms of the good because that's objectively good.
Okay. So self-esteem can have a good part.
I don't think so, because if, let's suppose you identify with your nation, then what has a good part is rating your actions, not rating your total self. So let's suppose I think my nation will be better if we have a free market. So then we rate the actions that lead to a free market, but not the entire nation. That seems like an overgeneralization also.
But if, for example, I'm an athlete, a good self-esteem can help me to have a healthy competition and trying to be better than the other athletes.
Yeah,
It can be useful. Or
as I said, um, self-esteem tends to erode good action because then you tend to worry about if I screw up tomorrow and fall flat on my face, then loser, my team does poorly, and that makes me a bad person or gives me low self-esteem, and that leads to anxiety. I must have high self-esteem. I must prove myself rather than do well. So again, the emphasis is on what you do in terms of your goals rather than bringing your entire self into it.
Okay. Now if you want, we can talk about the other aspect of this interview, how to be free in an unfree world.
Okay. Yeah, how to be free in an unfree world. And this is how to be personally free,
Personally free.
psychologically, and not politically. My area of expertise is psychology
Yeah.
and psychopathology and helping people with their problems. But there are brighter and more knowledgeable lights than me who could tell you about getting more toward liberty in terms of actions. But what I'm talking about is how to be free of emotional disturbance, how to be free of anxiety, depression, anger, procrastination, addictions, those kinds of things. And the principle is the same, that if you're addicted, let's say you're addicted to alcohol, alcohol addiction is a behavior. And since our behaviors don't come from situations, but they come from our thinking. Remember A, B, and C. It comes from B, our beliefs, and C is drinking, compulsive drinking, and A is temptation. A is you're tempted to drink, B is your thinking, and normally it's thinking in terms of demands: must, shoulds, supposed tos, have tos. Because I have the urge to drink, therefore I must. Or because everyone else at the party is drinking, therefore I have to join in. So it's these absolutes, musts, shoulds, have tos, dire necessities, that lead to our emotional and behavioral problems. So the answer is how to free yourself from the musts and shoulds. And the general answer is question, challenge, and contradict your musts and shoulds, the psychopathological ones, the ones that lead to anxiety, depression, and addictions, and look for evidence. And I maintain there is never any evidence for these psychopathological absolutistic musts and shoulds. There's just evidence for the preferences. I prefer not to drink, but there's no reason I must not, obviously, since millions of people are over drinking around the world. So there's no reason why I should be exempt from the human condition. But there is reason why it would be preferable for me not to drink, because when I do drink, I get negative consequences. And when I don't drink, my life is better. So it would be preferable for me not to drink. But there's no law, no 11th commandment, nothing in the Bill of Rights saying Michael Edelstein must not drink, obviously. And the roof isn't, if I do drink, the world's not going to come to an end. The roof isn't going to cave in. I'll just suffer consequences. So as Thomas Sowell has said, there are no solutions, just trade-offs. So if you have preferences, a preference leads to advantages if I do what I prefer to do, and disadvantages if I don't do what I prefer to do, period. That's it. Don't then jump to yourself as a good or bad person based on that. And that will free you from these emotional problems, since they come from these irrational musts and shoulds. And there are three basic categories of these absolutistic psychopathological notions. The first is a demand on oneself, and that takes the form of, because I prefer to do well and get approval, which makes sense, therefore I absolutely must, I should, and if I don't, I'm a loser. The second area is in terms of others, not oneself, but others. I prefer you treat me well, kindly, considerately, reciprocally. And because I prefer it, you absolutely must treat me well. And that must leads to anger, hostility, and resentment. And the third area is the impersonal conditions of one's life, not related to oneself or others, but related to life, because I prefer life to be fair, easy, and hassle-free. Therefore, it absolutely must. And if it's not, it's no good. So I might as well drown myself in drink or commit suicide or curl up in a ball and die, things like that. So get rid of your musts, get rid of your shoulds, they're fictions, and reinforce your preferences. And that will give you psychological freedom from these beliefs. And one way to look at it is that musts and shoulds are sort of like the state. There's no evidence it helps. You'd be better off without it. So see what you can do without it to have a happier life personally.
Okay, so that is the way of avoiding a burnout because of living in the state that we live.
That's a way to avoid. What did you say for Jonathan?
Burnout.
Burnout? I don't
Being
understand.
being sad about living in a controlling state.
Oh, I see.
Being,
So you're asking, am I suggesting a way to avoid being sad in a vicious state?
yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good question. It gets to another aspect here, and that is when we give up disturbed emotions like anxiety or depression, this isn't feel-good therapy where no matter how bad things are, you feel good. So you would still feel sad. It makes sense to feel sad. I prefer not to be living under controlling state. And because I am, that's too bad. That's unfortunate. That's regretful. And those evaluations about the situation lead to appropriate, helpful, adaptive, fairness, sadness, sorrow, regret, frustration. So we don't want to abolish those appropriate maladaptive negative emotions, just the ones that paralyze us and make us anxious, such as anxiety, guilt, depression, envy, jealousy, anger, resentment, hostility, and many others.
Okay. Well, if you don't have anything more to say on this topic, well, I would like to finish the interview with some personal questions, not too
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Please. Oh, please. I hope they're hard. It'll make
No,
it
no,
more interesting for me.
they are more of recommendations. I would like you to recommend to the public your favorite song, your favorite book, and your favorite movie.
Okay. Now, my favorite song, does it have to be a song people sing, or could it just be a piece of music?
A piece of music.
Okay, well, there's a lot there. I'm a big fan of Beethoven, Bach, and other composers. And one of my favorite pieces by Beethoven are his string quartets, especially the Razumovsky quartets are fabulous, and his piano sonatas, the Kreutzer and Spring sonatas, are heavenly. And my favorite book would be there are a lot of books around that I've liked, but well, could I say my book is my favorite book? 3 Minute Therapy. Is that cheating?
Okay, and your favorite movie?
My favorite movie. There are a number of movies I enjoyed and even have seen twice or three times. The movie 2001, I found very enjoyable. Do you know that movie?
Well, no, I don't know that movie.
Yeah,
What is it about?
it's a science fiction movie about the future.
I never heard of that movie.
Yeah, that's a good one. There was a movie about Gandhi. It might have just been called Gandhi with Ben Kingsley, which is a movie I loved. So those are a couple that, oh, there was another one called Breaking Away, which I saw three times, which was about college-age kids who were in well, one in particular He wished he was Italian. He lived in England. He wished he was Italian because the Italian bike racers were the greatest bike racers. So it was a amusing movie as well. I'm not a big movie goer though.
No. Well, thank you very much for being here with us. It was
you're
a pleasure.
welcome. Very good. Thank you for inviting me, Jonathan. I enjoyed it very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.